Welcome to the Canadian Powerlifting Podcast, the bi-weekly show that brings you the best of powerlifting in Canada. Our three co-hosts include Ryan Stinn, holder of the heaviest equipped squat and total in Canada, as well as owner of Unparalleled Training Center and co-owner of Inner Strength Products. Steve Cassioli, IPF World Record holder and medalist, the third strongest classic lifter in Canadian history, and owner of Cassioli Strength and Conditioning. Lastly, Avi Silverberg, world team coach and world bench press medalist, owner of pursuitofstrength.com, a site dedicated to coaching and education for powerlifters. Today's episode starts right now.
Season 2 of the Canadian Powerlifting Podcast is brought to you by LVD Fitness. LVD Fitness is a powerlifting apparel brand that donates 1 month of clean water to a child in need for every item sold. Follow them on Instagram and Facebook at LVD Fitness to join the movement.
Hello and welcome to the Canadian Powerlifting Podcast, Season 2. This is our last episode of Season 2. Don't worry, we're not going anywhere. We are coming out with a Season 3. We'll tell you a little bit about that in a second. But this week, we have a fantastic guest. I know I say that every week, guys, that we have a fantastic guest. But this week, we have none other than Brett Gibbs, two-time world champion. This guy has accumulated in the course of his 10-year powerlifting career 30 world records, on the raw side, on the equipped side, as a junior, as an open. We bring him on the podcast, and we just kind of have a round table. We talk about a lot of different things. We touch a little bit about his meet down in Texas, but what I really enjoyed about the conversation is he talked about the process in terms of leading up to that competition, some of the things he was doing and some of the things he was struggling with, and his mentality as he was going into Worlds. We talked about a lot of his coaching in terms of him being an online coach now. He's been doing it for about a year. So you all know Brett as Brett the athlete, but he gets it. We get into some really good conversations around coaching philosophies, around technique, around programming, and a kind of a different side of Brett, which I really appreciated hearing. And I'm sure that everyone will learn a lot from listening to this episode. We're not going to do our Coast to Coast bi-weekly wrap-up this week because we have so much content from Brett that we want to leave for the majority of the episode for that. But I'm just going to turn it over to Ryan here. Season 3 is going to come in September. We're going to take a little bit of a break now. We do have something brand new now. Ryan, maybe you want to talk about what that brand new thing is.
Yeah, we finally decided to get on this Facebook thing we've been hearing so much about. So we've created a Facebook page. Go and like it. We'll try and keep it up to date with upcoming episodes and any new content we're releasing. We will talk there about when our new season will be starting. Like Abby said, it'll be starting in September. We haven't set a firm date yet, but we're looking at making a couple little tweaks, little changes on the format. So stay tuned for some of those announcements on our Facebook page.
Exactly, and Steve had a fantastic idea which we really want to incorporate into the podcast, which is getting a lot more listener engagement through maybe asking questions on the Facebook page, maybe even having listeners submit videos, and we can talk a little bit about video technique and issues that potentially people are having that we can kind of dissect and really get into on the podcast. Because we really want to, we make this podcast for you guys, and we want to make sure that the knowledge and the content that we're putting out is valuable to you, and that obviously you can hear a little bit about our lives as well too. One of the cool things happening in my life right now is my roommate and best friend James Bartlett at Powerlifting Lawyer. If you don't follow him, his girlfriend is down in the Rio right now and competing at the Olympics for wrestling. And if you're watching this video podcast on the video and not on iTunes or any podcasting app, I'm wearing the wrestling hat that she gave me. So she competes on August 18th, and we're going to hopefully bring home some sweet medals. She's ranked second in the world right now, so that's pretty cool. What else we got going on, guys? Steve, how's your tan going?
It's not bad. The weather here's not the greatest, so tan game week at the moment.
And Ryan, how's the hair-beard ratio?
I think it's actually feeling pretty good right now. I shaved a bit off, and I'm pretty happy with the ratio. I took the head right down, so I'm pretty pleased with how it's going. My tan is going quite well. I think you can probably see how tanned I am if you're watching the video. It's definitely a shade darker than usual. I spent some time down in California, and I got a little bit of sun down there. So,
guys, it's summertime. You got to be tanning and have fresh haircuts. And without further ado, here's our podcast with Brett Gibbs. This week on the podcast, we are so excited to have Mr. Brett Gibbs. Welcome to the podcast, man.
Thanks for having me, guys. I'm excited to be here.
We know, the title of the podcast is the Canadian Powerlifting Podcast. We feel like you're part Canadian now because you've been here just under a year, living in St. John's, Newfoundland for some reason. But what kind of brought you to Canada, man? And why? How have you been enjoying your stay?
It's been a good time, man. I actually really enjoyed it. You know, all the slack I think Newfoundland gets. It was pretty hard to start off with, so I pretty much came from New Zealand straight over to so New Zealand's winter straight to Canada's winter. Newfoundland. I don't know what it's like compared to the rest of Canada, but we had a lot of snow come through pretty quick, and the snow didn't go away for about 6 months. And we're finally just getting some good sun in that now, so I'm actually starting to enjoy it a lot more.
Yeah, so what's your plan? Are you sticking around in Canada for a little bit, or are you going to head back to New Zealand?
Man, the countdown's on. It's about 6 weeks or so before we leave Newfoundland. And I mean me and my girlfriend. And we're heading to Saskatoon for a couple of weeks. And then going to head back to New Zealand from there. So going to be back in New Zealand for a New Zealand Christmas and a New Zealand summer, so pretty excited about that, man.
I think you just made all of the Saskatchewan lifters perk their ears, especially Ryan right there. Being how far is Saskatoon from you, Ryan? You're gonna get some training in with Brett.
2 hours.
That's nothing for Canada, man. We'll have to organise something.
What are you doing up in Saskatoon?
Much my girlfriend's parents are from, so we're gonna. She wants to obviously go away and see them before we go to New Zealand, so that's the plan. She's coming back to New Zealand with me, so.
That's cool. So you managed to meet a Canadian girl, convince her to like you, and convince her to move back to New Zealand with you.
That's it, man. I don't know what it was.
Well done.
That's cool. Let's jump into some powerlifting talk here. We all know Brett's two-time world champion. I think I just heard somewhere SBD came out with a pretty cool promo video of you when you were at the World Championships just a couple months ago. Where you were kind of previewing your meet, and you had said that you broke 30 world records over the course of your career, both raw and equipped, over the course of your junior and open career. We all know kind of how you did at Worlds. You placed second to John Hack, and just shaking your head there because we know that you wanted to come out with the gold and a few world records. So can you Yeah, can you just briefly maybe talk about your Worlds experience down in Texas? I know you kind of had big expectations for yourself, as always.
Yeah, man. Well, that's it. Like I always set my sights high. Like I'm never. I suppose ever since 2014, which was when I won my first World Championship, although it was a junior championship, it was still just a good breakthrough. Setting myself up to get into the open class, and then just looking at the raw numbers, I thought I can be one of the best in the world. One of the best ever going forward when Raw started to really do its thing and grow, and it's ever since then I had a really good finish to 2015. I had a poor championships in 2015, although I did eventually get first place after that guy last year failed his drug test. I finished off really nicely with a 9 from 9 meet, went 800 kilos for the first time, so that was really exciting. Finished off with a gym mock meet, totaling 827.5, albeit just in the gym. But that was really exciting. So like my expectations were just going through the roof for 2016. And it started off with the Arnolds. I guess it didn't quite go to plan, so I really wanted to make it all sort of come together. All that strength I knew I had inside me.
So being in North America,
come together for Worlds, and
it's really easy for you to kind of get down to the Arnolds now. Otherwise, it'd be this huge travel over to get to the Arnolds. So you went to the Arnolds, and then you went to do Worlds.
Yeah, that's right. So that was another 3 months later, and I knew going into it. Obviously, me and John Hack were the top two. We're going to go head to head, and it was exciting to have some really good competition like that, knowing what we're both capable of. And I was trying to set myself up for at least a 10 times bodyweight total. somewhere between the 830 to 850 range. But it just didn't quite go together. It was quite a stressful few months, I guess, leading into Worlds.
Yeah.
There has been a big change in, I guess, my training structure and how everything goes. Because if we go back to, let's say, a year ago, right? So I'm living in New Zealand. I've got a car. I'm driving everywhere. Like I'm really self-reliant. I'm really self-driven.
Yeah.
I'm just working a day job. I was working at the bank then, so I'm working 8:30 to 5. Really, really good routine. And then I haven't really talked about this before, but it's like coming from that sort of way of training, so now I can just get to the gym when I need to. I can just shoot down and get my food when I need to. I don't really have to think about too much, anything like that too much. And then, getting over to Canada and things just changed, right? So, as I'm getting ready for the Worlds, the gym wasn't within walking distance. I was having to rely on other people to pick me up. That was all on their time, so I was just sort of trying to work my way around everyone else, and it was really good. I really appreciate that, that the fact that everyone was able to do that and get me to the gym, and I was able to get my training in. But again, it sort of took that I guess, the responsibility that I have on myself. Right? How if you get that feeling, you just want to get up and go to the gym, you want to do it now. You don't sort of want to be sitting around for a few hours, which was, like, I guess I used to have everything so well planned.
Gotcha.
So I guess what I'm saying is that mentally going into training, everything was becoming a lot harder than it needed to be.
Of course. And I think also, like, you're talking about your day job at the bank, and Ryan, Steve, and myself know, just being coaches, like, when you're working for yourself, because that's essentially your job now, is your coach. And I do want to get into talking about, Brett the coach, because that's not a perspective that a lot of people kind of potentially get. But, it's hard work, man. Like, you're kind of like, you're not working set schedules, and sometimes you're kind of at the mercy and the will of your clients, and that's all part of the game, right? So it's hard work, in addition to kind of putting together the best possible training program.
Yeah, and that's 100% right. And then also on top of that as well is when you're thinking about powerlifting, literally, not just when you're outside of a day job. Now it is your day job, so you're thinking about it 24/7.
Yeah.
Like, you're going to sleep and you're thinking about, oh man, I wonder how my client got on today, and you're eager to get into your emails in the morning, and it's constantly on your mind. And then you're like, oh well, actually I've got to go and train now. How's my program looking? How's my numbers looking? So, like, I think the walk away from Worlds is, I think I've grown a lot as an athlete. I think I've gotten a lot stronger than I was last year, but just the mental side of things, the way I approach things, previously last year as compared to this year, I think I was a lot stronger mentally last year. So now I've really just got to regroup. I sort of know where I'm at and what I'm doing, with my clients, with the business side of things, and really get that nailed and dialed in, and then I can dial in my strength and bring those two together, and you're going to see a new Brett Gibbs next year.
Yeah, and I know that kind of Ryan is just shaking his head like he's kind of empathizing with you a little bit in terms of, like, you're constantly thinking about powerlifting, and it's hard to kind of get that new routine. Ryan, maybe you want to touch on that.
Oh, it's just, anything. It's always good to have a way to unplug from something, right? And powerlifting is, it's definitely a lifestyle, but to be able to walk away and do something different, like even if it's a day job where you don't have to focus on powerlifting for 8 hours during the day, and you can just mentally relax, because it's a very mentally stimulating thing to try and think about and focus on all the time. One thing I'd heard about, I was lucky enough that Canada didn't have any 83 kilo lifters, so I got to sit in the audience and watch you guys lift, which was easily one of the coolest experiences of the championship from a viewing perspective. But I heard rumblings in the crowd that you'd actually hurt yourself a few weeks before Worlds, Brett. Was that true?
Yeah, I had. So basically, when you're peaking for an event, obviously, and everything's sort of getting heavier as you progress. It was one of my heaviest deadlift sessions coming around, and I don't know what was going on. So I was going to bed, and I was sort of starting to get a really, really sore lower back, almost like my hips were just constantly being tilted posteriorly, and it was really, really weird. If I was lying on my stomach in bed, that would make it even worse. And I remember it was like just over the progress of a couple of nights, it was slowly getting worse and worse. And I had a big deadlift session on that Saturday, and I remember waking up that Saturday morning, and I just didn't have any confidence in me. You know how you just got something in the back of your mind?
Yeah.
And I think it was 285 kilo for a 3x3. And like, if I look back on some of my training, that's a heavy day, but I should be able to move it with really good bar speed and really not have to even think about it. And I went in, pulled the first set, got a triple at 285, 10 RPE. I went to the next set, did a double, and just put the bar down. I was so angry, just like my back was so sore, and just grabbed my bag and walked out of the gym with just sheer frustration. And that what that does to you mentally. I mean, we all know if you have a bad day, it can really badly affect you. And you've been doing all that work, and just to go in and do that, knowing how close you are to Worlds, it was really, really hard. But I had to take a few days off the gym, so I did miss a few sessions, and it did come right. I don't know what it was. I don't know what was going on, but I did come right. But I mean, on the day I wasn't injured. There's no excuses there. I was 100% fine on the day.
We were talking about this on the podcast before, but it's so much. I just think it speaks to your experience that, man, sometimes it's okay to just pick up your bag and leave. Like, yeah, okay, be frustrated, but man, I mean, it could have been a lot worse if you might have attempted that third rep on the second set, or even just the third set. You kind of have to, like, all of the experience should tell you when to fold. When to kind of just know your limits and walk away. And I think that's super important. That maybe probably even saved you on game day. Yeah,
that's right. I mean, if I go back and think about that now, being in that mind frame, trying to pull with that mindset, with the way my body was functioning that day, you imagine if I tried to pull that third deadlift and injured myself, or went on to that third set, or carried on doing that, maybe the injury wouldn't have gotten any better those few days later. Again, taking a couple more days off the gym just to relax mentally and physically as well. So it definitely paid off in the long run, but it just obviously wasn't optimal having that there in the first place.
I love about kind of just hearing what you're saying and just contrasting that with a few of these other top-level athletes is that there's always no excuses. You know what I mean? Like, you're not using this injury and some of these, training struggles as an excuse for having a poor performance. And I can just think of, there's tons of Canadian examples, but Kelly Branton's one of them. I mean, we all know what happened to Kelly at Worlds with, kind of him falling from his third squat and really hurting himself. But even after, and the aftermath of those events, he never ever blamed anybody or anything for his performance. Even though he came third, he wanted to do much, much better. But there's just no excuses. And I find when I actually look at some of these lower level athletes, lower level meaning just local level, not necessarily good athletes, but local level, and perhaps people who don't have as much experience, they always kind of blame these external things. They never kind of blame themselves. They always look to other things or other people or things outside of themselves to blame. But that's not you.
I feel like you're reading my mind, man. Like, when I talk to other people, like Kelly again is a great example. We always look, we blame ourselves. We look, we just look at things that haven't been going on, but it's never an excuse. We're just like, no, we've got to get back at it. We just got to make sure that doesn't happen next time. And don't blame anyone else. That's just quite frankly bullshit. Just blaming other people or doing anything like that for your own performances. So
we know that at Worlds this year, and I think at Worlds last year, you went 5 for 9 last year, right? And in Finland at the World Championships, and you actually came out and you won that meet. And that's fairly uncharacteristic in terms of when you look at the number of attempts made and the people who win gold medals at Worlds, they're often going 8 for 9 or 9 for 9. And we actually did an analysis of that of this year's Worlds, and that was the case. Making more attempts is what's going to set you up for the bigger total and the win. You won last year at a 5 for 9, and this year you went 5 for 9 and you placed second. How do you feel like you can improve on that kind of hit ratio? Have you thought about things that you want to do in order to make sure that those successful attempts are made? Is it technique? Is it just the attempt selection? What are kind of the factors there?
I think man, I think moving forward, I've just got to so basically what's happened is, so from Worlds last year, I was always training myself, always doing my own programming. I did my first cycle or first training block with JP Kelchi.
And we had him on the podcast, and we talked a little bit about that, yeah.
Yep, yeah, you guys had him on the podcast. Awesome dude, really, really good coach. So he took me under his wing. We went 9 from 9 at the first meet. That's when I first got 800 in Perth last year. So that was really, really good. It was really good to have that feedback from him stepping me through my training, working on technique, working on specificity in the gym. So, just things like, locking out your deadlifts correctly in the gym, Standing erect in the squat each time say you're doing a set of 4. Just working on small things like that to make sure that we're executing on the game day. And then again, coming into the Arnolds, I think there was a bit of a change that happened again, with all the travel and things like that. Squatting to depth, there was obviously an issue there with depth. And then I think the build up with the Worlds, I think what happened is I went a bit too heavy in the programming. It was a little bit too heavy. The bar speed wasn't where I wanted it to be. It affected me mentally. And recovery was a bit harder. I felt there was some weaknesses through my upper back, and that really sort of just took away from some of my confidence. So what I'm really looking to do in the next phase and to really build a total, go 9 from 9. And we all know that feeling, going 9 from 9 feels really, really, really good, especially when you're hitting the numbers right on, you're within 2.5 to 5 kilo of, your absolute max on that day. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm just going to have some fun in the gym again. I need to get some better bar speed in there. Keep the specificity really good, so making sure I'm practicing the movements, how I need to, low bar competition squatting with about 2 depth each and every time, and just being really, really honest with myself on how things move. And I've got to stop comparing myself to what I've done in the past. I've squatted 300 in the gym before. I need to forget about that now. I need to realize, right, Brett, this is where you're at right now. Here's a realistic target. Let's set up a strategy from how I can get myself to where I'm at right now to what that target's going to be. And I don't need to assess if I'm only squatting 275 right now. Is it realistic that in 8 or 10 weeks' time I'm going to squat 300 in the competition, 2.5 kilos lighter? It's probably not going to be. So let's be a bit more realistic.
I love hearing that.
Yeah,
So it's so hard to compare yourself. Well, I just heard 2 things from that, right? The first is that you're always reflecting on what you can do better. We had a recap of Steve in our last podcast where we talked about how Steve is going to move forward with some of his training with his deadlifts and things like that. And it just seems like, man, the best lifters are just always thinking about, okay, what can I do better? What can I do? What can I learn from what I've done and how can I be better? But also I just heard that, it's really mentally tough, and everybody goes through this, myself included, where you have these benchmarks in your mind of things that you've done previously. Whether it's like a 5x5 at a certain weight or 3x3 or even like a 1 rep. And it might not even be a max 1 rep, but it's like I did that 1 rep and it felt like, this RPE and the bar speed was this. And then you come back and you try those again and you haven't hit those benchmarks. It can be so mentally challenging to kind of be realistic, setting up the plan moving forward when you know that maybe you're not at those benchmarks. Maybe Ryan can touch on that a little bit too.
I think it can be tough mentally, and anytime your confidence is shaken, it always kind of sucks to try to go in and perform at your optimal level. But it's like you said, it's on game day you have to do what you have to do.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I think just I guess stepping away from some of those the way I'm thinking about things, just reassessing, and just having some genuine fun in the gym again as well. It's always stressful going peak to peak to peak to peak all the time instead of just having a really just laying down a solid foundation, a good training block. Having some fun with that, doing some less specific movements, and just having some fun in the gym. When you've been training for 10 years like I have, things can get pretty mundane. So I want to change it up again. And just feel like it's my first couple of years back in the gym again. I want to get that feeling back. So
let's talk about that, because I've been looking at the way that John Hack's been training, and some of these other guys after Worlds. I mentioned John Hack only because obviously you and him in the same weight class at Worlds, but seems like you two are doing completely different post-meet plans. Like he's back in the gym, just training hard and heavy and putting up PRs, like benching PRs and deadlifting PRs and heavy singles. And in my mind, it's like that goes against all conventional wisdom, in terms of what somebody should be doing after a hard peak for like a top meet. Whereas yourself, the opposite, you kind of, you went to Mexico for a couple weeks and traveled around with JP, and I think I even saw Kelly in the mix there, traveling around with you guys. And then, and then you're kind of slowly getting back, and the videos that you're kind of putting up now are like, high bar stuff with like lots of reps, or nothing over like 70%, or 75%, and it's very less specific, low intensity. Like, can you maybe talk about that methodology a little bit? And I mean, obviously, that's part of the plan.
Definitely, man. It's 100% part of the plan, and I covered this at sort of some of my seminars, and just you know I guess I want to touch on a broader subject, not just myself as well as powerlifting is more popular these days, isn't it? More people are getting into it.
Of course.
They're seeing guys like myself, like John Hack, like Ray Williams. They see us squatting a lot, they see us doing a lot of deadlifts, they see us benching a lot, and these guys come in that are training in their first few years. Say it's with their first year, second year, third year of training, and that they try and mimic what we're doing. They get these training programs like they've been training for 10 years or so, really specific movements. But when I like to think about training, is I like to think about, it all starts from like how athletic you are as well. So what's your sporting background? And I sort of think about laying down like a solid foundation, and I think about like a temple. The bottom of the temple, got to build a good wide base, and that's our foundation. Work our way up to the peak, and that's our competition, right? That's our 1 rep max on the 3 main movements. And I sort of feel like people coming into it these days are focused on that sort of top triangle, but whereas they don't realise that, I've built a solid foundation. My first few years of lifting, I was pretty much just a bodybuilder. I loved playing golf. I loved going to the beach. I loved skateboarding. I loved all of this sort of stuff. Yeah, so like what I do is like I think about just building this really solid foundation. We're talking about building muscle. We're learning how to use our body, how each of those muscles work and how they work with each other. And, not just in those specific movements like, squat, bench, and deadlift. So all I'm saying is that, I think I'm taking a step back, and I'm like, right, if I want to get better, if I want to increase on this 800 to 810 kilo total that I'm capable of right now, what can I do to get this peak higher? So what I'm trying to do is I'm going back to the basics. I'm like, I need to build a solid foundation, a really, really good work capacity, not just in these 3 movements, but across every exercise, every machine you see in the gym. I want to be able to do that with complete confidence, with good movement patterns, working the muscle, getting leaner, some building muscle, and then come back and use that foundation to work my way back up to this peak right up here. And I don't know John's background and also John Hack's background. I've got no idea. I know he's been a good lifter for the last few years. He's very muscular. He's very lean. So he's in a phase right now where he's obviously able to keep pushing that peak. But eventually he's going to get to a point as well where he has to step back. And that comes into, I guess, how you want to approach where you're at right now. And that's why you don't just have one vision of this is how I train and that's it, because it's constantly changing. It's constantly evolving. We're in different periods of our life or lifting years or, how our body's functioning. So I'm at the stage right now, like I said, I just need to build some more muscle, get a bit leaner, build more of a solid foundation. And I guess maybe that's where his coach wants him. He wants him to be there, and I need to be almost the complete opposite. And that's what you're seeing right now.
Yeah, you said, some people have to at least eventually come down from the peak. I feel like people keep pushing that peak until they're forced to come back down from the peak because of injury. And I just feel like it's such a fine balance when you get up to that peak, to sustain that long term. And that's the kind of perspective that it sounds like you're having. In order to think about, okay, I got to broaden this base a little bit so the peak can get higher, you have to have a long-term perspective. You can't just think okay, I want to be strong next week or next month. It's no, in a year from now and 2 years from now and 5 years from now, this is the train that's going to set me up for the higher peak. And maybe I want to bring Steven on this conversation because you're kind of doing that right now with your summer training too, right?
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing is, right, a lot of people, the stuff you see me post or I post, right, it's like that heavier single sort of deal, right? But what people don't see is I drop back a percentage to 75%. I'm doing a lot of sets at that. So for me, I'm just changing my training up right now, just hitting that heavy single, but I'm not going for massive PRs, right? I think a lot of people, what they need to see is that big number on the bar. They need to have that. They have to have that weight on their back. And I mean, at the end of the day, if you're doing that work at lighter percentages, you're still building that strength. You don't need that. And especially after a big meet, like Brett and I just had, your body is tired, right? It's beat up. It needs that rest. And you need that rest in order to recover and to start, like Brett was saying, that foundation again and start building it back up for your next competition. So yeah, that's what I think it's very important to take that step back, build that foundation, especially for newer lifters. Don't obviously you're looking at the top lifters, seeing where they're at, and mimicking the training is going to be pretty hard because you haven't built that work capacity up, and your chances of getting injured are much higher, right? So it's take that step back. It's focus on technique and movement patterns. Yeah, long term, like the technique and movement patterns. If you have those down from day one, that's going to carry you a long way once you get to those heavy weights. You're going to be training a lot more long term.
You just said like the best word, which is like your movement pattern. Like I feel like that lower intensity work also helps develop that, just ingrain that motor pattern, especially if you're executing on perfect technique every rep, every set. Brett, you were out here doing some filming for my strength book. You did a couple promo features for us, and one of the things we trained twice, and one of the things that I noticed is like, you know, I saw this side of you which wasn't your Instagram side or your public side, which was like just what you do in the gym. And, you know, the two workouts that I saw you do were actually fairly low intensity. And this was, you know, this was in April, kind of leading up to Worlds. I think there was even a day where you were doing like 50% or 55% slow squats.
Yeah.
And it was really, really low intensity. But, man, I was so impressed with actually how you approached the bar every single set. It was like 100% serious and 100% focused on that movement pattern, just setting up with the same execution and technique. Whereas I feel like a lot of novice lifters, less experienced, they'll approach that workout and be like, oh, I just have a light day, hop under the bar, you know, not execute it with that perfect motor pattern. Maybe you want to talk about that.
Yeah, well, one thing I'm really big on, and I always say to people, it's like, you know, when we see, like, say, professional athletes in almost anything, they might have their little niche, the way that they sort of do their thing. And I'm really, really big on building routine, so then nothing changes. We've got less risk of, like, variability when it comes to, you know, each and every week of training, and it makes it easier for us to see, right, what's actually going wrong and why was that different. So if we can take away those small things, then we can really start to nail the nitty-gritty when it comes to training numbers, bar speed, and things like that. So if we're approaching the bar different, say, each and every week, I mean, you know, who's that helping? Because we're like, oh, did that work better last week, or was this set up this week better? So if we can build the same way we approach the bar each and every time, it's going to obviously ingrain that technique. Nothing changes, whether it's light or heavy. And that's the way that I basically approach the bar. So it's every single time you'll know exactly what I'm doing. Breathing's going to be the same. The way the squat's going to be the same, unless it's like something like an eccentric movement, something like that. But yeah, just nothing changes, so it just doesn't feel foreign at all. And I'm really, really big on that. So just going through those processes in your head. And like you'll see it with good lifters as well. Like, you know, like Mike Teixeira is a really good example, like to use for deadlifts. You know, he goes down, grabs the bar, thinks about his breathing. He like shoots his air out, you know, 4 or 5 times, pulls himself in a position, and then goes. And we see it every time. We don't watch his training, and it's like one day it's only one breath, or one day he's standing at the top and he goes down and grabs it. You know, he's so efficient at the movement because he practices it the same each and every time. But it's good positions that he practices in as well. It's not a poor position he practices over and over again.
There was Brett. There was a question that came in when we said that we were going to have you on the podcast, and maybe you want to talk about this just because, you know, we are talking about execution of a lift. I think this person who asked this question, they heard you say somewhere that you refer to the deadlift as a one-piece pickup, and I don't know if that's something that you've said, but maybe do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I see the deadlift as like, let's just look at conventional, right? I pull conventional, but I just you know, I don't know if it's still really so much around these days. I'd like to think it's not, but everyone's always like, oh, you know, I'm really slow off the floor, but my lockout's good, or you know, my lockout's really fast, my lockout's really slow, but I'm fast off the floor, etc., etc. We all know what we're talking about. But it's just people just like losing position from the bottom, and then like, you know, obviously just rounding their back, pulling it up to the knees, and then just sort of using their lower back to try and extend the hips, and not using the glutes, not using the actual musculature we want to use to actually get the bar moving properly. And so they always look at things like, you know, like let's do rack pulls and things like that to tighten up that lockout. But then they pull from different positions, so the muscles at a different length when they're doing the rack pull, as opposed to that muscle length that they're actually in when they're in a rounded position off of the floor, trying to work the lockout from there. So I see there's all these inconsistencies that I see in people trying to break down certain movements when they're not actually working, I guess, the range they need to be, or that muscle length, or the power from the length of that muscle in a certain movement. So I just always like to think of it as one range of motion. It's like you need to pull yourself into a good position, stabilize the hip, stabilize the shoulder, activate the lats, and you should have a pretty constant bar speed. The same speed off the floor through the lockout. And I just see people constantly trying to find excuses in their deadlift when they know that they're just compromising themselves generally just off the floor.
Man, I love that sort of perspective because it honestly speaks to, a lot of people would see a weakness as like, oh, this is just a strength weakness. Like I can't lock out the weight. It must be that I need to do rack pulls. Whereas what you're saying is like, no, it's because like your bottom position is compromised, and as soon as you start pulling the movement, by the time you get to your lockout, you're not in an efficient movement to actually lock the weight out.
Yeah, so like, and I like to use examples of that if I can. Like, again, we'll go back to Mike Teixeira. I've watched him deadlift many times, and I've watched him deadlift on competition stage. Came out, nailed his first 2 deadlifts. Really, really consistent, really good looking deadlift. Comes out on his 3rd, and he goes to pull off the floor. He starts to lose position off the floor, pulls it probably 2 inches, and just puts it down. Okay, he's not going to battle it. He's not going to keep rounding his back. He's not going to keep lengthening that spine. And then basically, so that's one version. So he's like, right, I've lost it. It's not going to come up like that. So he just puts it down. But then you got the other side of things, who was also a good deadlifter. Someone like Kimberly Walford, she'll sort of just bend over, rip it off the floor, come up to her knees, and just losing position and really struggling for lockout. And those are the 2 differences you'll sort of see in deadlifting techniques.
I definitely couldn't have said that better. I mean, like a lot of people say, like for me, for example, it's like losing position at the knee, right? A lot of people say, oh, you need to work like block pulls, right? You have a weak lockout. It's like, no, you rush your speed off the ground, you don't stay in position, and that's the actual issue, right? A lot of people just think of that. The issue is what you see is where you're holding the bar and you can't block it out, or you're stuck to the ground, and that's the issue, but it's normally something else, and just working the movement and staying in those positions and, staying tight is definitely what you said, like a one-piece like pickup for sure.
Yeah, instead of yeah, go ahead, Brett.
What I was going to say was like, I've got a sort of the way I get, and if we're training the deadlift itself, like, so if we get to a point where we're literally rounded through, say, the upper back or lower back, for instance, when we're pulling off the floor, right? We all know when it gets heavy, we're generally going to go to that position when we're talking about really maximal loads. If we can look at ourselves and say, right, this is my true 1 rep max, this is how much, but this is how much I can technically pull off the floor in a better position, and this is, say, 20 kgs or 30 kgs less than that true 1 rep max. And let's say we're doing percentage-based training. If we look at it and we're looking at, say, 3 months worth of program, so that could be anywhere up to 24 deadlift sessions, right? Now we're not going to say that if we use a percentage-based program, that every single deadlift sessions we're going to get into poor positions like it is with our 1 rep max. Now I'm not saying that at all, but I'm saying that generally by the time we get to probably halfway through a volume phase, those last few reps are going to be generally looking like it's your 1 rep max in that sort of similar position. But if we do it with the technical max, if we say use our technical max as our percentage-based training, then we can get generally 3 months or 12 weeks worth of deadlifts, but not only just 12 weeks worth of deadlifts, it's 12 weeks worth of deadlifts in a good position. Now, the difference I like to see in those two, or finding the technical max, is generally whether if we lift off the ground in the technical max with a slightly rounded back or slightly rounded lower back, for instance, and once the weight comes off the floor, that back position doesn't change, then that's still technically a pretty good max. The muscle hasn't lengthened too much or anything like that. But it's the point where you're going over that when you actually start to pull off the floor and the bars coming off of the floor, but you're still continuing to round and it's starting to get really slow from there. That's the point where we differentiate the technical max and the sort of maximal loading. And then we look at that from a say programming point of view. If we're constantly hammering, say, our lower back in the conventional deadlift because we're constantly lengthening that muscle, our glutes aren't working as hard as they need to be, then that's now we're now strengthening essentially our lower back. We're increasing our risk of injury. We're not using the glutes for, say, 6 weeks of the program, and we're overdeveloping one area and we're underdeveloping one area. When if we use a technical max, we can develop both of those areas. We can use the musculature of the body for 12 weeks as opposed to half that time, and we can become a better lifter. And generally, we see if we increase our technical max, our one true rep max that we just give everything for on that third deadlift is going to come up as well. And that's a good way I like to think about the deadlift.
Yeah, I love it. And you're not. I like how you made that differentiation between like, okay, a little bit of flexion in your low mid back is okay if you can maintain that position. That's fine. It's when it becomes like you start pulling, you're out of position, it's rounded to begin with. As you get into the mid range and lockout, you just totally.
Yeah, you continue to flex.
Yeah, you lose all sorts of integrity and all of that. I really like that. So can you tell me an example, like in your own training, like where you would have like your 1 RM max and then a technical max? Like what would that actually be in terms of numbers for you?
Well, like say for myself, my best ever deadlift is 320 kilo, and that's when my upper back starts to get a little bit rounded. I'm not as happy with the form, but I can still get it up. I can still lock it out, right? So I'll take it. But like, let's just say I want to work technically and I want to actually work a 1 rep max, like I said before, in a slightly better position. For me, that's probably around 295 to 300 kilo before it's starting to really get hard. And myself, because I don't do exactly, or when I work with JP, my coach when I'm peaking, we don't generally just look at percentages. We're looking at sort of the numbers itself, which are generally going to be based off a sort of goal target. So, like the heaviest I might pull in training for, let's say the last couple of peaks, is around that technical max, so it's 300 and 305, and we just look to improve bar speed as opposed to going above and beyond that and getting right up into the 97, 98%, and losing position and actually just fatiguing ourselves. So
I love that. I mean, just looking at bar speed as a measure of kind of how strong you are, I think a lot of people overlook that, but it is like, for me, it is one of the main indicators of how we're getting stronger. We don't need to push ourselves to that true 1 RM max. If the technical max is at that bar speed, it's still looking good. It's quicker than before. I mean, that's a pretty good indication of your progress. I know Ryan kind of does something like I mean, Ryan never grinds in training and moves past his kind of technical limitations. I don't know, maybe Ryan, you want to kick in on this conversation?
Yeah, I was going to just basically agree that I don't think of it in that way, but I think of it just training pretty looking reps, right? I'd rather do a set of 5 that looks too easy to someone because I'm not breaking down form on any of the reps, and I really think that's an important thing. If you're training crappy reps, you're gonna train for crappy reps. So I think kind of the same way you're focusing on technical perfection, and that's perfect. I think it's the best way to improve and limit your risk of injury. Too many ground out reps and fight reps in the gym is just gonna lead you to probably hurting yourself and losing time in the end. So.
And then again, I definitely think there's a time and place where you have to have some like harder weeks that the bar speed may not be as fast. You're going for some I don't know, some volume like PRs and stuff. Like as long as that like volume and the things you're hitting, the bar speed is slower, but you're still sticking with that technique. I think that's still fine for like maybe like a week or two, right? We're trying to push yourself a little bit, right?
Yeah, I'm definitely not saying that you shouldn't try. Well, I do say that sometimes, but you just don't want to try too hard, right? Yeah. It's a matter that your whole 12 weeks isn't you grinding yourself into the ground,
Absolutely.
Right?
Brett, you a lot of people know you as Brett the athlete and stuff, but you and I have had conversations offline about some of your coaching styles and philosophies, and you're really trying to. I mean, this is what you do full time: is you coach, and you have a number of athletes that you work with. Maybe just talk about that process in terms of how you coach your athletes remotely. We're all kind of online coaches. We kind of do things slightly differently. But do you check in with your athletes each week? Like, do you provide that technical kind of advice that we're talking about on this podcast right now? How does your programming work? Is it like one week at a time, month at a time? Like, how is all that structured? How do you actually go about doing that?
Yeah, so I've been doing it for about probably a year now, so coming up to a year. It's getting pretty close. So always looking to improve ways I can do it. Talking to guys like yourself, I'm doing it a bit longer. So the process I'm doing right now is I'm very, very big on checking in every week. So I like myself, if I'm training, I want to check in with someone to sort of see if everything is going to plan, and I want to provide that same that same thing back to my clients as well to see how they're feeling mentally, physically. I want to see their video feedback to see how that is going. And what I do is, so they'll have a certain assigned day basically. So they'll say contact me on a Tuesday or a Wednesday via email. They'll get their program weekly. So as long as I see their update, everything's going fine, then I'll progress with that sort of planned out structure, and I might plan that out over 8 to 12 weeks, something like that in advance, and just sort of make adjustments as we go, just to bring the most out of them as I can. The sort of sign-up process of what we try to look at before I even look at actually doing a program is just sort of just get a general understanding of their background, what drives them in training, what their goals are, how long they've been lifting for. Quite often or not, I'll actually get them to send through videos of just them maybe attempting a 2-rep max or a 3-rep max in each sort of lift, so I can just sort of see what their actual movement patterns are like, because there's no point in assigning someone a template which is squat 3 times a week when they are just busting the balls and breaking down in form and doing all the sorts of things. So there's no point in doing that when you know that it's going to probably hurt themselves eventually. So just take a really individualized approach basically. I don't have just a whole lot of templates that I just send out. I try and personalize it as much as I can and just build rapport with each athlete, because I think I think this is one thing that's overlooked with online coaching as well, is I'm not just a guy at the end of the computer as well, and I don't see him that way. I very much want to get to know that individual, so I can see what he's like, how he responds, how he feels mentally each week, and just want to have that relationship with them as well, so they can be open and honest with you, because I've had clients before that say things are going well and then they send through the video and it didn't look anything like they said it did, or they were actually starting to get hurt because they weren't actually giving me honest feedback on how their squats were feeling or how their recovery was going. So just building that open relationship is really, really good. And it was really awesome. I was over doing some seminars in the UK just last week. I had 2 of my clients come to one of the seminars in London, and went out and had a few beers and went out for some food and that with one of them after, which was just really, really cool. And I think that that takes training that client online, it just takes it even further, and it just it's just really good, man. It's really good.
Yeah, man, I love how you just said you got to have that open relationship, because there's going to be times as a coach where you're going to have to kind of come down hard, right? It's not just all easy feedback. Like, some of the feedback is hard, and you kind of have to know how to say it in the right ways and all of that stuff. Are you taking more athletes? Are you what's your game plan here in the next? You're moving back to New Zealand, you said. I'm assuming that you're going to continue coaching, and are you taking more athletes? What's your kind of next plan the next year or so with respect to coaching?
Yeah, man. So like I said, I always look to try and add more value to what I'm trying to provide. So what I'm basically trying to do is I'm going to just set myself up with I want to get a really good website going. Basically, I want to be able to have video login, so people can and look at exclusive content. I want to make that really a good sole reason for going to the actual website itself, aside from just signing up. I want to be able to start blogging on it, so I want to start talking about my clients on a blog, and also my own training, and just get some good general discussion going in a sort of blog styled overlay on the website. And then I also want to start just a podcast as well, so even feature some of my online clients, feature guys like yourselves, and just really start to get myself out there as well as a coach and an athlete, and just talk about powerlifting more, man, because that's what I love to do.
Man, so, you already got the podcasting mic. You're set, man.
I know, man. So yeah, I'm super excited about the next probably 12 months coming up, getting back to New Zealand, getting a whole lot of new things going, and just providing more value back to the powerlifting world, man, as well as my own training. I'm just super excited to get some solid training under my belt in New Zealand in particular, and see some old faces, some old friends, and just have some good times in the gyms I grew up in. So
one of the things I like when I talk about you, man, is that you're always thinking big, and some people think big, but I kind of doubt their execution on how they're going to actually get to those big things. But with you, man, I'm just I totally believe you. I just know that all that's going to kind of come together. What before you go, talk about A7, your sponsor, and some of the things that maybe you're gonna one of the things you're gonna do for our listeners.
Awesome, man. Well, for those that don't know who A7 are, you're crazy. If this is going to be a video podcast, you can see this red shirt I'm wearing right now. Basically, A7's, they contacted me sort of middle of last year, late last year. It's got just a bar grip on the back, so like the bar doesn't slide. You know, most commercial gyms, you can't use chalk or anything like that, or you just get super sweaty, and the chalk sort of stops working, and it just gets absorbed by all the sweat. So pretty much it stops the bar from sliding, really, when you're low bar squatting, or when you're on the bench press, you don't slide at all. And that's not the only thing I love about it. Like, obviously, it's a great shirt, and they are a sponsor of mine. I love working with them. But the founders, Jason and Tatiana, they are like amazing people, always giving back to the community. They've got an awesome sort of A7 group going. So they've built a really good reputation with themselves and with the company. And they've got distributors across the world now, which is really exciting. Cool. They're a growing company. And I'd like to give away 2 T-shirts to some of the listeners out there today. I don't know how you want to go about that.
Steve, how do we go about doing that? Steve is Steve knows everything.
So viewers, you can go to our website, www.canadianpowerliftingpodcast.com, and under your contests, there you go, and you can sign up to win those 2 T-shirts from A7.
Yeah.
So
and we'll make that 2 individual winners, or we're going to make that 1 winner gets 2 T-shirts. That's
2 individual winners.
2 individual winners.
2 individual winners. Yep. So I'll be able to link you guys to the website. You guys can pick your own shirts, and we'll get that sent out for you.
Cool, Brett. Really appreciate that. Brett, we really enjoyed having you on the podcast here, and I know we could talk about a ton more things, and there was, I'm sure we'll have you back on to continue hearing about your journey and everything when you get back to New Zealand. And yeah, man, thanks for coming on.
Man, thanks for having me, man. Time flies
man.
on this podcast, doesn't it?
They do, man.
Man, I could sit here all day and talk, but yeah, thank you guys so much for having me on. It's been awesome, and look forward to hearing it come out soon.
Cool, dude. We'll catch you later.
Good, man. Take care.
All right, boys.
Okay,
Thanks,
man.
Brett.
There you have it, the finale for Season 2, Canadian Powerlifting Podcast. Steve, how do you feel, man? You're a veteran podcaster now, 2 seasons.
Feels awesome, man. I love it. How you feeling?
I feel good. I feel ready to go. I kind of want to get this episode really pumped me up here. Brett, obviously, super knowledgeable guy, and I would love to get him on the podcast again to talk about, like I said, just more of this coaching, programming, technique. All that stuff was awesome. And Ryan, Season 3 coming up. We're going to release these A7 shirts. We're going to give these A7 shirts away in Season 3, first episode. What is the deadline? How can people get into the contest?
Steven said, go to our website, CanadianPowerliftingPodcast.com, click on contest, and enter there. We'll do a deadline of September 1st. We will actually do the announcement for the winners on our first episode of Season 3, which will happen in September. We don't have a set date on that yet, but it will be one of the 4 Thursdays in September for sure.
And don't forget, go to our Facebook page now. It's brand new, Canadian Powerlifting Podcast. That is where we're going to be sending updates and keeping everybody up to date with the podcast. And I think that's it, guys. It's been a pleasure. Season 2 was awesome. Looking forward to Season 3. We out. I don't know. How do you end that?
No, that was good. That was good.
This episode was brought to you by LVD Fitness, where LVD stands for Lift, Visualize, and Dominate. Visit lvdfitness.com to pick up your CPU-approved swag and follow them at LVD Fitness to find out which events they're coming to near you and to catch a sneak peek of their spring collection. You've been listening to the Canadian Powerlifting Podcast, the podcast that brings you the best of powerlifting in Canada, hosted by Stephen Cassioli, Ryan Stinn, and myself, Abby Silverberg. Please follow us on Instagram and check out our website for some great free powerlifting content at www.canadianpowerliftingpodcast.com. If you like what you heard today, please rate our podcast on iTunes and don't forget to listen to every other Thursday for a brand new episode.